the chillest spot for IT walkthroughs and reviews, Tech Stack Lounge.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Tech Stack Lounge. Today we're taking a deep dive into something really cool, Immutable Linux.
Yeah.
We're going to explore what it is, how it's different from your, standard Linux, and, maybe even figure out if it's something you should consider trying out. So joining me today to help us unravel all of this is a Linux expert, Diane.
Hi. I'm really excited to dig into this topic.
Yeah, me too. So, for someone coming from that traditional, you can change anything world of Linux, what does it even mean for an operating system to be immutable?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's kind of like thinking about a fossil preserved in amber.
Okay.
The core of the OS, the really important foundational parts, are made read-only.
Huh.
In a normal Linux system, you can pretty much tinker with whatever you want, but with an immutable system, those core files are locked down.
So it's kind of like having this master copy that's protected from any accidental changes.
Exactly.
So even if I mess up a configuration file, it won't permanently damage my system.
Exactly. Any changes that you make, even as the root user, they're temporary, they're kind of isolated.
Yeah.
And when you reboot, your system goes right back to that pristine, untouched state.
Wow. So it's like a reset button for your entire OS.
Pretty much.
That's pretty wild. But wouldn't that make updating a total nightmare? I mean, if you can't change those core files, how do you actually update the system?
That's where things get really interesting. Instead of the kind of classic way of updating individual packages, Immutable Linux updates by making an entirely new OS image.
Whoa.
With all of the changes kind of baked in, and this new image is just swapped in the next time you reboot your system.
Huh.
It's more like how your smartphone updates.
Right.
You download a new system image and it's just applied all at once.
So no more dependency hell, no more broken updates. I just reboot and I have a fresh updated system.
Exactly. That's a huge advantage of immutability. The updates become much more reliable and predictable because you're basically just replacing the entire OS with a new tested version.
Okay, I'm starting to get why people like this, but doesn't that lock me out of doing certain things with the system? What if I want to install specific software that's not included in that base image?
Yeah, that's a super common concern. But Immutable Linux has some really smart ways of handling that. While still keeping the core OS safe and untouched, different immutable distros kind of take different approaches.
Okay.
But they often rely on things like containers and package isolation.
It's like creating these isolated spaces where I can install it and run software without it affecting that core OS.
Exactly. And these isolated environments can be managed in pretty user-friendly ways. Some distros use things like Flatpak, which lets you install apps from a curated app store, while others give you tools to create and manage isolated environments based on different Linux distributions.
Oh, that's cool. So it's not about preventing customization. It's more about giving me safer, more structured ways to do it.
Exactly. It's about finding a balance between flexibility and stability. And as we kind of dive deeper into some specific immutable distros, we'll see how each one kind of strikes that balance in its own unique way.
I'm excited to learn more. Let's do it.
It's really fascinating how they each approach it.
Okay, so let's talk about those approaches. We've mentioned a couple, Fedora Silverblue and VanillaOS. What are the key differences?
Okay, well, a key difference is how they go about software installation and updates. Silverblue really prioritizes this streamlined, secure experience using technologies like OSTree and Flatpak.
Okay.
Think of OSTree like managing your OS as this giant version-controlled project, where each update is this clean snapshot. And Flatpak keeps applications kind of self-contained, so they are less likely to cause conflicts or issues across your whole system.
So with Silverblue, I can confidently install apps knowing they're less likely to mess up my system.
Exactly.
What about VanillaOS?
VanillaOS uses a Debian base, and it uses a really cool tool called AppX. This allows you to manage packages from different ecosystems like Debian, Arch, Fedora, all within isolated environments called Distroboxes.
So VanillaOS is for people who want more flexibility in choosing their software sources.
That's a great way to put it. Imagine you need a specific app that's only available as a Debian package.
Right.
With VanillaOS, you can just spin up a Debian DistroBox, install it there, and it doesn't affect the rest of your system.
That's really cool. What about openSUSE Aeon? How does its approach to immutability differ?
Aeon leverages the power of the BTRF's file system. BTS is known for its snapshotting capabilities, which are like system-wide save points.
Oh, so if I make a change and it breaks things, I can just revert back to a previous snapshot.
Exactly. Aeon makes taking those snapshots and rolling back super easy.
Okay.
It also uses a transactional update system, kind of similar to Silverblue, which means that even major OS upgrades are handled really smoothly.
So Aeon's all about peace of mind, knowing you can always undo things and recover from mistakes.
Yes, it's designed to be very user-friendly, especially for folks who are maybe transitioning from a traditional Linux setup.
Okay, this is making me want to try an immutable distro. But are there any downsides?
One thing to keep in mind is that immutable systems sometimes have a larger disk footprint compared to standard Linux.
Okay.
This is because they're storing multiple OS versions and snapshots, which takes up more space.
So if I'm working with limited storage, I need to think about that.
Definitely something to consider. Another thing is that certain types of software, particularly those that need really deep integration with the kernel or like low-level system components, they might not work perfectly in an immutable model.
So it's not a magic bullet for everything. There are still some cases where a traditional Linux setup might be a better fit.
Right. It's all about weighing the pros and cons based on what you need it for. But with the right distro, you can get a super stable, secure system without giving up too much flexibility.
This talk of snapshots and rollbacks makes me think about security. Could an attacker exploit that somehow to, like, take over an immutable distro?
That's a really great question. Security is obviously super important. And while immutable systems make it much harder for attackers to gain a foothold, no system is completely unbreakable.
Right.
There are still potential ways in, so it's really important to stay updated on vulnerabilities and follow security best practices.
So it's about layers of protection. Like with any security approach, we've focused on desktop distros. What about immutable Linux for servers? You mentioned Fedora CoreOS before. What makes that one a good choice for servers?
Yeah, Fedora CoreOS is a great example of how immutability can really shine in a server environment. It's built for minimalism automation and rock-solid stability. Think of it like this lean, mean container running machine, perfect for things like web servers or microservices.
So if I'm running a bunch of apps in Docker containers, Fedora CoreOS would be a good option.
It would definitely be a top contender. Updates are automatic and atomic, meaning they happen all at once with very little downtime.
And if an update causes an issue, I can always roll back.
Absolutely. That's a huge advantage in those server environments where uptime is mission critical.
Are there any other server-focused immutable distros worth mentioning?
Yeah, there's Flatpak Container Linux, another popular choice. It's known for being really lightweight and focusing on containerized workloads.
Okay.
And then there's openSUSE MicroOS, which also uses those transactional updates and BTRS snapshots to give you a stable, secure platform for your servers.
Wow, it seems like there's an immutable distro for, like, everything.
Yeah, and what's really exciting is seeing how this approach is being used for a lot more than just servers. We're seeing it in embedded systems, IoT devices, all sorts of things.
That is really cool. This deep dive has been awesome. I'm starting to really understand immutable Linux, but how do you actually use one? What are the key workflows and tools? So we've talked about what immutable Linux is and why people are so excited about it, but let's get into the how. Like, what's it actually like to use an immutable distro?
Yeah, that's the big question. The good news is, even though the technology behind it is different, the user experience isn't that much different from using standard Linux.
So it's not like I need to learn a whole bunch of new commands or tools?
No, not at all. A lot of the tools and concepts you're used to still apply, but there are some key differences, especially when it comes to installing software and updates.
Okay.
For instance, you won't be using your typical package manager like apt or DNF in the same way.
So let's say I'm using Fedora Silverblue, which we've talked about a bit. How would I install a new application?
With Silverblue, you'd mostly be using Flatpaks. It's kind of like an app store for your Linux system. You can browse FlatHub, which is like a central repository for Flatpaks, or you can use the command line tool Flatpak to search and install apps.
So it's a more streamlined way than like manually tracking down packages and dependencies.
Oh, exactly. And Flatpaks bundle everything an app needs to run, so you don't have to worry about compatibility issues or conflicts with other software plus. Because they run in these isolated sandboxes, they're much less likely to cause system-wide problems.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
What about VanillaOS with its Apex system? How does that work?
VanillaOS gives you a bit more control over where you get your software from. With Apex, you can create these isolated environments called Distroboxes. They're like these lightweight containers
Yeah.
that let you run different Linux distributions side by side.
Oh, so if I need an app that's only available as a Debian package, I can just spin up a Debian Distrobox and install it there.
You got it.
Yes.
It's a pretty clever way to have the flexibility of multiple distributions while still keeping those core benefits of an immutable system.
Okay, so we've talked about installation.
Yeah.
What about updates? We've mentioned these atomic updates and rollbacks, but how do they work in practice?
It's surprisingly smooth. Most immutable distros will let you know when a new OS version is available. You choose when you're ready to update, you reboot your system, and the magic happens. The system switches over to the new version during that reboot process. And since it's an atomic update, it's either completely successful or it rolls back to the previous working state without any issues.
So no more interrupted updates or a half-updated system. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's one of the best parts of immutability. Updates are way less of a hassle and much less likely to cause problems.
Updates sound pretty easy. But what about customization? We've talked about how immutable systems encourage a different way of doing things. Can you give us some examples?
Sure. One common approach is using containerized applications. Say you're a developer, and you need a specific development environment. Instead of installing all the tools directly on your system, you could create a Docker container that has everything already set up.
So it's like having a portable workspace I can use whenever I need it, without messing up my main system.
Exactly. And if you want to try out different tools, you can just create a new container. It keeps things organized and prevents conflicts.
What are some other ways people customize immutable systems?
Well, you still have control over things like your desktop environment themes, keyboard shortcuts. You can personalize all of that without affecting the underlying OS.
So it's not about taking away customization. It's about encouraging methods that won't make the system unstable.
You got it. It's all about finding that balance between flexibility and reliability.
This has been super helpful.
Yeah.
I feel like I actually understand how to use an immutable system. But with so many different distros out there, how do I pick the right one?
I would start by thinking about what you're going to be using it for and your comfort level. Are you looking for a desktop system, a server, or something more specialized? Then think about how comfortable you are with using the command line and tools like containers. Some distros are more beginner-friendly, others are geared toward more experienced users.
And of course, hardware and software compatibility are important too.
Definitely. Make sure the distro you choose supports your hardware and has the software you need. The best way to find out is to try out a few and see which one you like best.
That's great advice. Well, this deep dive has been awesome. Immutable Linux has a lot to offer, especially for those who want a stable, secure, and easy-to-maintain system. I'm definitely going to check out some of these distros.
I'm glad to hear it. It's been great exploring this with you. I encourage everyone listening to give Immutable Linux a try. You might be surprised how well it works for you.
Awesome advice. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. And until next time, keep exploring.
If you like what you're hearing, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Thank you for your support.